The Nazgul had been looking for the One, and had briefly missed Frodo by the road in the Shire, at the Brandywine River, and at Bree. Patrolling the east-west road, the remaining Ringwraiths were dismayed to see Gandalf upon Shadowfax riding eastward, but as they did not feel the draw of the ring upon him, they knew he was not the bearer. They followed him to Weathertop and waited for the night to draw in on the 3rd of October, as he was a fierce foe for even all of the Nazgul. The Hobbits and Aragorn were presently getting eaten alive in the Midgewater marshes, but were able to spot the light show on the bleak hilltop from afar as the Ringwraiths failed to take down the wizard. Their hunt continued though, and would come to Weathertop on the night of the 6th of October, and there the Hobbits stood against the terrifying gloom.
This is definitely one of my favourite scenes in the books and the films, because it really just shows the spectres of death coming down upon the Hobbits in their horror. Saruman did say to Gandalf that the Ringwraiths were out and about and they would kill who would carry the One Ring, so why did they not just stab Frodo repeatedly rather than putting a damage over time Morgul wound on him? That's the question I'm hoping to answer today. Yes, it would make things very difficult for the Nine. Aragorn was even confused. He said on the morning after the attack, "I've been trying to discover something of their movements, and I found nothing. Cannot think why they've gone and do not attack again." And so before we go more in depth about why this might be, let's remind ourselves exactly what happened. The book isn't all that different from the films.
Over the lip of the little dell, on the side away from the hill, they felt, rather than saw, a shadow rise, and the shadows seemed to grow. Soon there could be no doubt. 3 or 4 tall black figures were standing there on the slope, looking down on them.
Spooky stuff, and with the proximity to the Witch King, the ring is trying to tell Frodo to put it on, which he then does, which is a bad move.
Desperate, he drew his own sword, and it seemed to him that it flickered red, as if it was a firebrand. 2 of the figures halted. The 3rd was taller than the others. He sprang forward and bore down on Frodo.
The 3rd figure, by the way, that was the Witch King, and he didn't seem all that bothered by the barrow blade.
At that moment, Frodo threw himself forward on the ground, and he heard himself crying aloud, "O Elbereth Gilthoniel." At the same time, he struck it at the feet of his enemy.
So it's the middle of the night, and the powers of the Nazgul are at their utmost. It would be prudent, now that Aragorn's surprise emergence, that effect has now gone, why don't they just return and stab some more? More deadly to him was the name of Elbereth. So, yeah, the exclamation worried the Witch King, and thanks for that, by the way, Aragorn, very cool of you. And it brings the question, is this little guy in league with the High Elves? Because only they would really start talking about Elbereth or Varda. So when Gildor and company came to the inadvertent rescue of the Hobbits in Woody End, "May Elbereth protect you," and after he says, "I name you Elfriend, and may the stars shine upon the end of your road." Now the stars, they're clearly quite dastardly to the riders, but also Elbereth Varda is, frightening to them, as Aragorn said, and it's fairly obvious that if a few Tralala elves, if they can get them to scuttle off, then the prospect of having a greater collection of elves at his back, that would be certainly thought-provoking. Just checking if I've got any on me. But why is he then able to invoke the name of Varda, and is something about to happen right now? That's certainly the worry. Because, well, obviously something did happen, and after Aragorn had kind of chased the bemused Nazgul away, a black cloak and a Morgul blade was found nearby. And the cloak did actually have a cut in it, so Frodo didn't completely miss. Yeah, I'm not going to go walking in that. That's really high. It is basically like Merry and Pippin in Farm Maggot's Field. Of course, this now rattled the Nazgul, certainly, because they know that Gandalf is about. he's probably helping the ringbearer. And then who is this Dunedain bloke that is with them? He's probably helping them, but then why does he not have the ring? Why does this halfling have it? And how does he dare to invoke the name of Barda and then, whilst wearing the One Ring, striking at Sauron's most powerful servant? Seems like something is amiss, and they might not have been told the full story by their boss. And let's not forget that the main weapon of the Ringwraiths is fear. Now, if no one is scared of them, then that is their main weapon, then that is completely nullified. And, you know, the rest can apparently just be solved with a flaming torch. Now, Frodo's attack against the Witch King is very reminiscent of a couple of other duels in the Legendarium. Those being the duel between Fingolfin and Morgoth, of course Sauron's former boss, and the Dwarf King of Belegost versus the father of dragons, Glaurung. Now that's going to be back in the studio because I can't really talk about that out on the trail.
But yes, Frodo's attack at the Witch King is similar to Fingolfin against Morgoth, and also similar to the Dwarf King of Belegost, Azaghal against Glaurung. In the ruin of Beleriand and fall of Fingolfin, Morgoth cast a shadow over Fingolfin like a storm cloud, but Fingolfin gleamed beneath it as a star. His blue shield was set with crystals, and he drew his sword Ringil that glittered like ice. This is, it's quite similar to Frodo and the Witch King, where you have Morgoth casting the shadow and the Ringwraiths being literal shadows. Fingolfin is shown to be illuminated by the stars, or like a star, and after Gildor's words of naming Frodo an elf friend, is he now similarly illumined by stars shining on his path too? Anyway, yet with his last and desperate stroke, Fingolfin hewed the foot with Ringil. Again, Frodo did desperately draw his sword and try to strike, but Ringil is said to mean cold, which is interesting as Frodo has his sword like a firebrand, which is, as we know, the opposite. I will get to this in just a moment, but with the dwarf in of the fifth battle, even Glaurung's mighty armour was not foolproof against the blows of their great axes, and when in his rage Glaurung turned and struck down Azaghal, Lord of Belegost, and crawled over him, with his last stroke Azaghal drove a knife into his belly, and so wounded him that he fled the field, and the beasts of Angband in dismay followed after him. This is quite similar to Frodo versus the Witch King too, with the Ringwraiths clearing off, but the obvious difference is that the heroic Fingolfin and Azaghal actually physically harmed their enemies, but Frodo just spooked the Nazgul and, well, he didn't get killed.
An interesting comparison though also is between Frodo and Morgoth. They were both stabbed by a piercing chill, obviously. Fingolfin's sword was called Ringil, and Frodo was stabbed by the Morgul blade, and they would both carry those injuries for life thereafter. Very unfortunate for Frodo, not so much for Morgoth. He's not really one of my fave characters. The Witch King was dismayed by his mission. On one hand, Gandalf had rattled him and his companions with his fire on Weathertop, and then on the other hand, he had set out back in July of this year to find a Baggins of the Shire with the One Ring, and now we're in October, just as we are here in sunny Derbyshire. And Sauron was displeased back in September to hear that there have been no leads to have been found yet. So to return now, that's kind of off the table. Yet the ringbearer had resisted him, and that's not something that he would have expected. And his blade was surely from the Barrow Downs, meaning that he had indeed defeated a wight. Now, obviously, he may not have known this, but the wound that Frodo could have dealt to him was as deadly as the wound that he himself dealt to Frodo. Of course, he'd find this out when Merry stabs him in the back of the knee at the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. So he kind of backed off, but certainly he did not believe that Frodo could have survived the nigh 2 weeks that it took Aragorn and the Hobbits to reach Rivendell. So he probably thought, oh well, I'll probably get away with it, until he realised that he probably wouldn't, and that's when they went back on the chase. So hence there was a brief respite in the hunt for the ring, allowing the Hobbits and Strider to evade the Nazgul for a short time, until the fear of Sauron ultimately overcame any fear of Frodo, of Aragorn, or of Gandalf. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me today, as I have been gone with Gandalf though I can't see where he's gone. Maybe he's still stuck in the corn. And I'm going to try and traverse this field without annoying any more cows. So anyway, ta-ra. Always do a check of black riders on roads like this. Don't see him, but there was some horse poo earlier.